John Harper here. Today, appreciation and gratitude. This is part 3 in a series I'm writing or videoing called The Real Will Disappear You. I've done 2 others in this series, but they're blog posts, and the links to those will be on the YouTube description. Also in this video, I'm going to discuss how the ego self can be seduced into surrendering to true nature. So today we're going to be looking at the power of appreciation for transcendence and transformation. But first, a couple of quotes for orientation and tone. This first is from Almaas, founder of the Diamond Approach. When we really recognize ourselves and let ourselves be in the moment, we come into an amazing freedom that brings in a sense of natural appreciation of just what is. Then we can accomplish and do all kinds of things, not to achieve value, only to express it. And this next quote is from Adyashanti. Gratitude is the appreciation of what is, of life, of existence, of anybody and anything for just the way it is. I've been thinking for several weeks now about addressing the topic of appreciation. And this morning at coffee, I read an article online titled, The Most Important Skill People Are Losing. And I wonder if you can figure out what that is. And just take a moment and ponder that. And that skill is empathy. So I thought today would be a good day to talk about appreciation and gratitude and how the real will disappear us. So it seems obvious that gratitude and appreciation are intimate with each other. You can do a quick search online about the differences between those and the connections. I want to say before I get into this that I have a lot of appreciation for men who come into this work as armored up and as screwed up as I was when I got into this work, and even before that when I stepped on the spiritual path. I also appreciate the rest of our adventurous cosmonauts, but I have a special fondness for people that might have had an ego survival strategy like mine. My ego survival strategy was to outlast and survive. To get big, strong, power. And if it was important enough to you to hurt me, then you needed to be willing to go to nuclear war. So that's the type of armoring and really screwed up place I was coming from. Which takes me back to empathy. It was grace and empathy that opened me up. It was the courage, honesty, and nobility of my fellow students in my Diamond Approach group who did their work that finally opened something up in me and allowed me to make progress toward becoming a human being. And that process is definitely not complete. There's, I was going to say a long way to go, but who knows? You know, the Sufis say the path is only one step. You step out and it steps in. So I was coming back from my group one weekend, driving home, and I remember a curve that I was on, and I realized that I was having a feeling. I forget what it was. You know, way back then it was probably anger or rage or hatred or something. But there was that moment driving where I was very aware, for maybe the first time, that, by God, this is how I feel. Definitely knew that this was my feeling. And it had taken a lot of time in the work to expand my narrow range of feelings. And I ran across a little book way back then that I have loaned out decades ago and never came back, that was a list of words for our feelings. There were hundreds of words in there that I had no idea were actually feelings. And it made me aware of just how narrow a range of emotion I had in my life. My life was anger, a really crazy kind of love, needy love, a need for acceptance, sadness, there was sadness, a few others, very narrow, very narrow. So here I am driving down the road, having a feeling, and probably for the first time in my life, realizing I know what I'm feeling. I know it in a way that I'm in touch with it. I'm just not reacting to it. I'm experiencing it. And all of a sudden I started feeling this appreciation. To know my feelings was almost unbelievable to me. And as I just was simply appreciating that moment of knowing my feeling, I started feeling humanness. And I started experiencing an appreciation for the human condition. And that was for myself and for everyone else in one of these human bodies, having a human life. And I just started to get vaporous. Space started opening up all around me. And it was an interesting mixture, this space, this appreciation that was opening up. My heart was just soft and getting softer and opening, and it was like I was just spreading really thin. And at the same time, the humanness brought this like water density to it, which later on in the work I would realize was just the beginning of getting in touch with what we call the water chandelier in the work, which has to do with our humanness. You know, quite honestly, I don't know how I made it home, because there were moments driving through the mountains and the canyons and where there was just no one there driving that truck. And I'd only recognize that when I showed back up, you know, but I was still more focused on the appreciation and the humanness. It wasn't a real shock to me to, you know, go, oh, how'd I make that last curve without going off the road? That experience has repeated itself 1,000 times in my life. And it has actually become one of those qualities of essence of our true nature that I find it fairly easy to pay attention to and have it open up in me. And I think that's because I'm surrounded by life and people, and there is so much going on to be appreciative for, and just the appreciation of having a life. And I can just look at people. I've known people in this work for 30 years. I grew up in the military. I never had friends for more than a couple years at a time, so all of my long-term friends and relationships like that are people in this work. And I can just look at some of these people, I feel that appreciation, and I start to go. It's just like fading into the sunset. Just that kind of disappearing. There's just appreciation. It moves beyond me appreciating, me having an experience of appreciation. There's just this sweet softness of appreciation. It's like the glow of a peach. It has that fuzz, if you can imagine that there's actually a quality of light that has that kind of blush and that kind of texture. You can feel it, soft and velvety. So, how true nature seduces the ego self. It's kind of a riot, this thing we go through with our ego structures and self, and for a while there, most of us have a few years of doing battle with it, and there's that part of us that thinks, well, I need to get rid of it or fight it or annihilate it or this, that, and the other. And, all that's well and good, and there's good times, bad times, and exciting times. It's like a Disneyland ride at times. But, the ego is seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And when you're in touch with the real, it is pleasurable. It feels good. It is joyous. It is sensate. It is just marvelous. And the ego likes it. The ego would like to have more of that. And so the ego wants to kind of get that, have more of that. And we can use that to the advantage of something deeper enough, to the advantage of the very thing that is arising, that the ego wants more of. Because if we play with that for a while, if we just become the lab rat in our own life and just test things and play with things, we'll discover there's a way to play hide and seek between the ego and the essential, to where we move closer and closer and closer, and just then, like in a kid's game, all of a sudden it's like, oops, and you're gone. But you don't know that until you come back. And you go, wow, I disappeared. And it happened because we were playing that game, that hide and seek between ego and the real. And so that's how the real can seduce the ego and disappear it. I'll just wrap this up with a couple more quotes from A.H. Almaas. The first one's out of Diamond Heart 3, Being and the Meaning of Life. One way I see our situation is that the creation or the universe is like a tree. Love is the flowers of the tree, and the human being is the final fruit of the tree, the final fruit of creation, The thick nectar of the ripe fruit is gratitude. Gratitude for how things are. Gratitude for being vulnerable. Gratitude that you can be completely influenceable. Gratitude for being human. And this other quote is from The Unfolding Now, as was the first quote in the video. This book opened with a discussion of the appreciation for being real. We saw how natural it is that when the heart, the feeling center of the human soul, is touched by realness, when it feels reality, it responds with love, with appreciation, with liking and enjoyment. Now we can see that it also responds by recognizing that realness has value, that it is beyond the mind. It has an intrinsic worth that cannot be measured in worldly things. And I couldn't swear to it, but I probably had that experience and figured some of this out before I read these quotes. Certainly before I read The Unfolding Now, because that was years away from being published. And so, let's spend a little more time with appreciation and gratitude. It really feels good, and it does so much for us and others.